Hey, welcome back to Connections Break Barriers. This is a special conversation series that we're hosting with the MBA Programs at Kennesaw State University. Today, I'm really excited to welcome Renee Bourbeau to the conversation. She is a person that is amazing, as you will see. She leads the MBA programs at KSU, so we'll talk about what's happening on campus, but we'll also talk about how she has built and maintained relationships throughout her very distinguished career. It's a conversation that I'm really excited for you to see, and I can't wait to hear your feedback. See you soon. First, how are you?
Ryan, I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm here with you at the gathering spot.
I'm very excited that you're here and really excited for this conversation. There's a lot that I want to get to. The place that I want to start, though, I believe we all come from somewhere, right? Like, it informs the work that we're doing now, right? So let's go back to where you're from. Where's home?
I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. Yes, I've come a long way, like in terms of miles.
Cool. I like Cleveland.
Yeah, no, Cleveland's great, but I mean in terms of miles and just in my journey from Cleveland. I love Ohio, and Cleveland is a great place to be from.
What was childhood like? Where did you grow up? Like I moved a lot growing up, right? So I had a lot of family time, but I didn't have like a lot of community time, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. What was home life like growing up?
Oh, the great question. Well, I did not have a traditional home life. I was raised by a single mother, and I spent a lot of time with my grandmother as a young child. My grandmother was my best friend, and I have a twin brother.
Wow, you're a twin.
Yes, and my brother and I, we both started working at a young age. So wow. I think like 11, we both got paper routes, and that's how we got like money for snacks and extras and the cool shoes. Yeah. So I quickly learned then that I could make more money if I had multiple paper routes. Yeah. So by 12, I had 3 paper routes.
One of the things that I want to explore in these conversations, like we hear about the jobs that people have, but we don't talk a lot about how they get those opportunities. So I don't know if you remember how you got the job when you were 11, but if you think about the first like job where there was a relationship or like somebody that helped you to secure that opportunity, tell us about what that job was and how you got there.
Sure. So, I didn't have a lot of people open doors for me from my community because, I was from kind of a real, lower middle class community. So I learned from a young age that if I wanted to, have more for myself, and I was ambitious even as a child, I remember that I was going to have to figure it out and kind of figure it out on my own. So I remember when I was in college, and I'm first generation undergrad, first generation master's grad. As a first, in my sophomore year, I could see the kids above me, and as a junior or senior, they were all getting internships. Yeah. And nobody in my family had ever had an internship. Nobody even knew what that was. And so I figured I have to figure this out. So I remember there was something called the Washington Center for Internships and Academic Seminars. And I'm a little researcher at heart, so I researched how do I get a scholarship for this thing. It was like $1,800 to go to DC for the summer. Yeah. And so I applied. I love contests and raffles, and I will just keep applying. Somebody will say yes. And so I applied for a scholarship for this thing, and I got the scholarship. So I was able to go to DC for that summer in between my sophomore and junior year. So I would say that's like my first job. Yeah. And I worked for the U.S. Information Agency as an intern that summer, and it was a great experience, but just kind of kept taking shots until I got my foot in the door.
The people that you met that summer, so I love DC. I spent 8 years in that city, and I think it's one of the better relationship towns. It's just a great place to be able to meet people. Yeah. Were you meeting people that summer and what was happening while you were there?
I 100% agree with you. DC is a wonderful city for networking, and getting to that space in DC that summer, it changed my life. And it's because of those relationships and the people I met. because I interned there that summer, I mean, there's so many opportunities to network in person
Sure.
in DC, and so I would just go to everything I was invited to.
Okay.
I think that's the other thing, you have to show up. And so when you get invited, you show up, and then it's what you do when you get there. So I would talk to anyone who would talk to me because I just loved being there so much. I knew I wanted to come back after graduation, but I needed a job to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So I would talk to someone, and at that point, I really wanted to be like involved in journalism. I was a journalism major. So I had my elevator pitch, but I didn't even know it was an elevator pitch. But if someone would talk to me, I'd say, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do, and I really want to be a press secretary. And then they would say, oh, you have to talk to this person. And I don't even know how I knew to ask them, but I said, oh, can you introduce me to that person? It was probably inappropriate at times, but they would do it. And, they probably just saw this as someone who could use some help. And so I just kept networking my way and I ended up getting a job as a press secretary on the House Government Reform Committee through those relationships.
So it's a lost art, right? Doing what you're talking about doing. And a lot of folks would hear that and like, hey, you're going to all these events, you're talking to all of these people. Some folks would say, well, that's a waste of time, right? I don't have time to do that. Like, what's going to come of going to this event? What do you say to folks when you hear that sort of, I guess I'll call it a critique, but just that concern that might not be the best use of time?
Well, I guess I can speak from my experience, and then also I've coached now hundreds of grad students through my work at KSU and then also at Emory before KSU. I would just say you've got to take an omni-channel approach, and I mean certainly have the LinkedIn profile, have a great resume, but you've got to show up in person. I do think it is more relevant than ever, especially when it's so easy to kind of game your resume with keywords that the applicant tracking system simulator gives you, but you have to assume a lot of people are doing that, right? So how are you going to stand out? And the networking is the way that you stand out.
So let's double click on networking. What is it sounds like super one-on-one, but like what is networking truly? Like it's talked about in a bunch of different ways, I think, but like if you are effectively networking, what are you doing?
I think that you are connecting with another human being, just even like on a friendly level. It doesn't even have to be with a purpose, but more just like some of the best connections that I've ever made were, people that I may have met walking into the event, and we just happened to be walking at the door at the same time, and just kind of, we both maybe had a nervous expression on our face, and it was like, hey, you want to walk in together, and that's networking. I mean, you're just kind of being your authentic self, and everyone's human, and we all have fears and insecurities and aspirations and goals.
It seems like, though, you also approach networking like with the long game in mind, right? It's not, again, I think another common mistake is folks will go to an event, they'll meet someone on Monday, and if by Friday that wasn't the best connection of their life, they're like, oh, what was the point of going? And the folks that I'm talking to that like are super successful, sometimes it's not until years or decades later that like going into the event at the same time becomes meaningful, I guess maybe in a different context. Has that been your experience, or have you found the quick connection to also maybe get you to wherever you were trying to go?
So I really think that, there may be a little bit of both that I've experienced. Maybe you get lucky and like somebody that, you happen to cross paths with has a need for something like your skill or something at that time. But I think more often than not, it's about the long term. And we all know when we go to an event and you can see if somebody comes in, they have an agenda, they want to pass out 5 or 10 business cards and then hit the door. I mean, you can kind of sense that. I think people have an energy about them. But if somebody shows up and they're like authentically wanting to be there to meet people and build a connection with other people and so that everybody wins, I think that comes across too. I think it's the long game that kind of it works out most of the time.
So we've got to talk about Kennesaw State University. It's amazing how much the institution has grown over the last several decades. Mm-hmm. You are now leading a very quickly growing MBA program. Talk to us about, one, the overall campus and what's happening at KSU, mm-hmm. but also the programs that you're leading.
Sure, happy to. I think that KSU, just as a whole, their secret to success, our secret to success, is that we show up. I mean, we show up in person, not only on campus, but to networking events. Mm-hmm. We bring employers to campus quite often. Our alum come back. And also at industry functions all around town, you'll see KSU folks there, and we show up. And even in our office, you know, we're in our office 4 or 5 days a week, everybody. We're just really committed to being there and supporting the students and growing the programs. So I am now going to be over the Executive MBA program, and then the evening MBA program and the web MBA program. So it's a big responsibility, and I'm just so honored to be at KSU because the student demographic, the student profile, I mean, that was me. And you know, I have an executive MBA. 50% of our students are first gen. I know what that feels like. I know the support that the students are going to need. I've worked with international students before, and we are trying to, you know, just be open to all students, all demographics. And we are an incredibly inclusive campus, authentically. Yep. And so I think that, you know, that combined with our commitment to partnering with industry to bring in modern skills such as AI and digital transformation. Yeah, I was
going to ask about the coursework.
Yeah, so we're really plugged in. Actually, just coming from meeting with our advisors, many of whom are leading AI teams and digital transformation and digital marketing teams for some of the most recognizable brands in the world.
So outside of the courses, which like the programs that are being built in emerging industries, right? So it's like very timely. That's awesome. But I think another thing that's awesome is just the relationships that are formed on campus. There's something super fundamental about a university, that what that setting can do to help to facilitate connections. So I want to spend a couple minutes there. In the times that I've had the opportunity to be on campus, you can feel that folks are connecting. And it feels like the sort of relationships that are really going to pay dividends long term. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about that part of what the program is also bringing, right? So there's the academic piece, but then there's like this community relationship piece that I think has to be a part of how you think about the value prop.
Absolutely. I think that our greatest value proposition for our students is right off the bat, the ROI. And you know, our MBA, our evening MBA program is around $20,000 for the entire program, which is, it's amazing. Yeah. I love talking about that program. The web MBA program is around $25K all in. And the executive MBA program is less than half the cost of other executive MBA programs in the Atlanta metro area.
Can't beat it.
And we're so proud of that. And I think our students show up, they're not financially stressed. Mm-hmm. And we also recognize that even at those price points, it's still a big financial commitment. But they're not stressed to the point where like they have to make something happen today. They are able to see the long game. They're able to put in the time and the relationships and just be authentic. And in turn, the community gives back to them in that authentic way. And I think there's just a really good result that happens.
You have built an incredible team, too. So I want to spend a couple minutes there. As a leader, what are you looking for in folks when you're thinking about welcoming them to the team?
I think that one of the most key skills today is just the ability to learn new things. Okay. So if somebody is able to learn or even open to learning new things, then I can teach them. You know, I can teach them anything, or I can point them in the right direction to learn a new skill. The same would be true as like if you can learn one software program, well, you could probably learn others. Mm-hmm. And as things are changing so rapidly today, I think just being open to changing and learning new things is just so key.
Yeah. Do you feel like that is something that folks know is important, right? Again, I think we're at such an interesting moment where the fundamentals, the things that we were taught going back to kindergarten, I feel like we know them, but we don't live them out on a regular basis. So what is your process, maybe is the best way to try to ask this question, to staying informed, to staying on top? Because it's one thing to have the idea about, hey, I want to always stay on top of what's next. There's another thing to actually feel like you're doing that on a regular basis. So how do you do that?
That's a great question, and thank you for the nice words about my team. I love my team at KSU. They're amazing people, so talented, and show up every day, wanting to make a difference, and that's great. I think that how I try to foster that environment is that it's okay to ask questions, and I'll be the first to admit I don't know everything, and I don't think anyone knows everything. And I think starting from that place, it just gives a baseline of psychological safety that it's okay to raise your hand and ask for collaboration or ask for maybe an additional resource on something. That's how we all can kind of get more done faster.
Hey, we're going to get back to this conversation, but if you're like me, you're always trying to advance your skill set and grow both personally and professionally. One of the most effective ways to do this is through advanced degrees. I'm proud to be working with my friends at Kennesaw State University for this podcast. With 3 MBA programs to choose from, executive, evening, or web, their curriculum incorporates the latest industry trends and skills that will allow you to make an immediate impact in your career. With KSU's MBA programs, you'll benefit from a flexible format that fits your schedule, including part-time options, 100% online courses, and even a unique weekend format for the Executive MBA. Graduate in as little as 19 months while building lasting connections with a cohort of peers and professionals. Plus, you can see ROI fast with tuition starting as low as $20,000. Nationally ranked and featuring dual accreditation by AACSB International, ranking it in the top 2% of business schools worldwide, Kennesaw State University will help you reach your full potential. Ready to start your journey? Learn more today at ksumba.com. For folks that are going to listen to this conversation that are like, okay, I am ready to commit to embracing being more engaged in my personal and in my professional life, what words of encouragement do you have for people that I've been reading a lot about how this is the loneliest time in human existence and recorded memory. Right? People have never reported being this disconnected from folks, and it's something that's super concerning for me, because it's no matter what we're trying to do, a job, you're in the classroom, anything, it's going to involve people, right? And I think one of the things that we could do to be helpful, and it's again super simple, is just to be encouraging to folks. So a word of encouragement for someone that is really interested in what we're discussing and is just trying to figure out how to get there, what do you say to them?
I would say to them, kind of go toward what you want. And, it makes me sad to think that people do feel so lonely and disconnected this time, because I think that this is the greatest time to be alive. I think it's an amazing time to be alive. And I think, yes, there are challenges, and everyone has challenges, but there's more opportunities than challenges. And I feel like, at least in my lifetime, I see more opportunities for myself and for everyone else than I've ever seen. And I can see changes, real changes. So I would say if someone wants to take the next step, I would say just step away from anything that you view as dark, like negative. Yeah. And kind of just go towards what you view as a positive, and things that will uplift you. And it works for me. And I've spent a lot of time over the last year in nature, because for me that's uplifting. Before that, I was spending a lot of time kind of doing things that I kept doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And I was like, something has to change. And it was hard to figure out what needed to change. So I kept changing, making little incremental changes, until finally I made I literally moved. And that has been a change for me. But I will say, like, sometimes when you're the first person to do something, and I know from firsthand experience, like, not everybody's going to like it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to do what you think is right for you.
You're one of the things I deeply admire about you and your work is how you maintain relationships with folks. A lot of times I think it's found in the small things. So I'll call it a process, but I really think it's who you are. How have you thought historically about maintaining relationships over time? Like, what do you do?
Oh, that's a really great question. You may be giving me too much credit, Ryan. I love people, but surprisingly, I'm an introvert. But I'm not shy.
Yeah.
Like, you're not shy either.
I'm not shy, but I'm an introvert.
Yes. So I do need that time to reflect. And I may have a conversation with someone that I think it went really well, but then I'll go away, and I'll think about that conversation for hours. And I'll think, what could I have done differently? How could I have impacted that better? How could I have, said something different? And I'll think about this conversation and then analyze it the same way. And then the next time I try to do a better job.
Yeah.
And I just, I try not to beat myself up now. I mean, I'm almost 50 years old. When I was younger, I used to beat myself up, and I stopped doing that. I try to be nice to myself now, but I think that's another tip for people.
You've built an incredible community online, specifically on LinkedIn. Why has that been important?
I think that LinkedIn, it's a little bit of a crutch for me. Like when I can't get out to an in-person conference or something, I kind of can live vicariously through the people who have attended and posted about it. And I am a big advocate for just like speaking positivity into people and their posts. And I always love to say congrats or a thank you or something publicly on LinkedIn. But it's been important to me. I've been on LinkedIn for, 20 years now, maybe even longer than that. And at one point, I was a top voice. I stopped. They keep telling you have to keep posting so many times, so I lost my top voice status. But that's okay. I mean, maybe one day.
You're still a top voice.
But anyway, I think that Microsoft and LinkedIn, they've just done an amazing job with that platform, and it's important for people to be on LinkedIn, but to have a profile that's really reflective of who they are.
Sure. Okay. This is a harder part of the discussion, but I think it's important, right? So relationships and work and in the classroom don't always go well, right? And you have to transition sometimes into a new season. How have you approached difficult moments like that where there may have been a colleague or maybe someone that was in one of the programs that you were managing where it wasn't a good fit for this reason or another? How did you get through that difficult period?
That's a great question. I mean, conflict is a part of life, and I've had my share of conflict, and some of it that I initiated, and some of it that I've been on the receiving end of that I didn't want. And sometimes you see that on MBA teams as well.
Yeah.
So I think that what's important is to kind of separate the emotion from the conflict first, and just to figure out what is this really about. And to really just stick to the facts, which is not easy.
It's hard.
When people feel offended or disrespected, it's easy to go emotional. And so, what I practice that I now do, I'm not sure if it's the right thing, but I need to take a step back. I need to almost remove myself from the conflict and think about it, get more input, get more feedback from maybe other observers and get their thoughts on it. And, sometimes I'm wrong. And I'll admit when I'm wrong. Sometimes I just, maybe I didn't see it correctly. But I'm at the stage in my life now where I don't care as much about being right, like I have to win. I care more about everybody winning.
This has been something for me that I've spent a lot of time in reflection on, because I think that like seasons may be difficult with a person, right? You might not be completely in sync, but there still should be a path. And maybe this is the optimistic side of me that just can't ever leave. But that the relationship should still, in some form, hopefully, continue. So how, if there's an example that you have of where that's happened, right, where a person wasn't a good for the team anymore, but you still were able to show up as a mentor, or still were able just to stay lightly in touch. Has that happened, right? And like, if so, how did you make it happen? Because I think that you have to be intentional in order to get to that outcome.
Yeah, I think you do have to be intentional, and that's a hard one. I mean, that's when, like, if you leave a team, or if somebody leaves your team, I mean, those are big moves. You know, that's almost like leaving a family. You know, it's a really big. You know, that'd be like a 10 out of 10. So I think that, yes, that is always the hope that the relationship can continue. I don't think it always happens, and sometimes you just need space before you can revisit that. But I mean, certainly there are several colleagues that I still keep in touch with, that I worked closely with on past teams. But you know, it could be even a growth area for me, where I'm not really. I'm not a sentimental person. It's and so I don't always circle back to check on everyone, but I should. And sometimes I rely on LinkedIn for that. Like, maybe I don't have, because I've moved several times. I lived in Florida, I lived in New York and DC, and now Georgia, and so everyone's kind of scattered around in my life, and so. But, you know, I think phone calls may be a way to also connect.
I can completely relate. Honestly, where it comes from with me is I'm so focused on what's next. And it's not that what happened wasn't important or isn't important, right? I just become consumed with, like, whatever the moment is. And I'm similarly trying to, like, have moments where I pause for a second and think about, wow, like, this time last year, life was a little bit different. And 5 years ago, it was certainly really different. And, like, you know, there are people in those seasons, some that are still with you and others that aren't. But maintaining relationships with as many people as possible, not just for the sake of it, but because they've had a positive influence in your life, is something that I'm, like, trying to, it's one of my 2024 things to do. I want to go back to the classroom for a second, because it's one of the places, certainly looking at the relationship between students and professors, where you're able to develop a connection. A lot of times you'll hear the concept of sponsorship, right, that goes beyond mentorship. Have you seen that happen on Kennesaw State's campus? And give us some examples of when it's happened, when it's worked well.
Sure, absolutely. So our faculty, I'll say, especially in the Executive MBA program, most of them, they have like a lot of relationships with employers or consulting relationships. And so in that program, the students are able to really develop great relationships with the faculty and let them know what they're hoping to do with the degree, like as a next step.
Sure.
So I have seen faculty go out of their way to arrange for introductions or mentorship opportunities, or to even get a student involved in a project so that perhaps they can have that real-world experience to kind of help parlay them onto the next adventure or the next business opportunity. So I see that in the evening program. There are so many opportunities for the students. There's maybe even sometimes they get overwhelmed by the choices, but I am so impressed that at KSU, our evening students can attend any career fair that's on campus.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I think that's almost unheard of.
Yeah.
You know, typically, like an MBA candidate would have to be prepped for this one particular fair, and they can only go if they're, you know, have this certain profile, but at KSU, they're invited to every career fair.
That's awesome.
It really is awesome. They're also invited we have 14 clubs, student-led clubs, just at Coles College of Business that our MBAs are eligible to attend. It's just great.
Looking personally, similar question. Your role on campus has expanded mightily, right? You're over all of the programs, and I imagine that there's some relationships with other university leaders that have been important. So how have you positioned yourself, other than being very good at what you do, being super talented, but from a relationship standpoint, like how do you like to show up in a professional setting that positions you well to be the person that is sponsored and that people are championing?
Well, thank you for the nice compliment. And I really put, I don't know if this works for everybody, but this works for me. I mean, I'm 5'3", and I like to wear my hair long because it's easier. And so I'm like, well, I'd like to put in a little bit of effort on my aesthetic, on how I show up and what I'm wearing. And all my clothes aren't super expensive. I mean, sometimes I'll buy clothes on Temu. I love Temu. But sometimes I'll pair it with something that does cost a little bit of money. But I put in the effort. I follow fashion influencers on Instagram. And I'm like treating the street like a runway is one of my favorite, and what M wore, So I'll follow them, and I'm not like naturally fashionable. I just will literally copy a cool outfit, and and then I feel good when I walk in, and I may have only spent $25 on this thing, but I feel great.
Yeah.
And then when I walk in, I just feel like, hey, I'm ready for work. You know, I'm ready to be here. I'm ready to have an impact. I want, like you mentioned about being interested in the future. I am too. I just love thinking about what the future could be. And I want to signal that to people, like, hey, I know what's going on. I'm involved. And so I think that I show up like that. And I'm also not afraid in social settings to just mingle around. Yeah. I don't just talk to one or two people. I talk to one or two people, and I'm like, hey, do you mind? I'm just going to go mingle around, and I'll catch back up with you. That key is to make sure you follow back up with the folks, but I'm fine to just mingle around like a butterfly. And, and then also in my office, I always have the door open, and I'm there, and I try to create a space that looks inviting. Like I literally hung wall sconces on the wall. And wow. They're cordless, and so it's a rechargeable light bulb. Okay. You just charge it like your phone.
That's funny.
But everyone who walks by is like, wow, look at those sconces, and they want to come in and talk about sconces. That's fine with me. But I try to make friends with people first. When I first started this job at KSU, I know how important stakeholders are. So I literally just set up 30-minute meetings, get acquainted meetings with every stakeholder that would accept a meeting invite from me. And just talk, not about business, but just talk about, get to know them, their family, what they're interested in, about their background, and then it's just very easy after that, to make.
The double click there, right? Because again, it's one of those things that I think folks hear that they should do, but it just doesn't happen. So why did you do that? Why was that important to you?
I did that because of I learned from past mistakes, and the past mistake would be where I didn't do that, and I came into a campus and started doing a bunch of things, and in hindsight was kind of like a bull in a china shop, and that didn't go over that well. And then you spend all your time trying to repair, and so now I realize, okay, and anytime you're going into an environment, there's structures in place. There's statuses in place. There's, even though KSU is not very political, I think they're more innovative. But there's still people, built that school. Yeah. So I want to show them respect. And I think that's really what it is, a sign of respect. So when you come into an operation, an organization, go meet the leaders who built it and thank them and let them know who you are and get to know them.
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. You can't really know the future if you don't know history, right? And it sounds cliche in many ways, but it's the truth, right? And I think it's certainly true inside of organizations. It is important to know that thing that you don't have any context about, that was a decision that someone had to make at some point, and it meant a lot to them when they made it, and they're really proud of it now, and you acknowledging that you understand that happened, yes, 2 decades ago, sometimes is the thing that unlocks the door for that person. And then you can go off and go build whatever your version of the new thing will be. But I think a lot of people skip past go on just understanding a culture isn't the same thing as being complacent. You can still make change, but the foundation matters.
It does, for sure.
I mean, again, it's striking to me how they're talked about as being like different things. Like you can't, innovation is like supposed to be like totally disconnected from how the organization got to whatever place it is, and it's like it doesn't have to be.
I agree.
My final question, this is a question that I'm asking everyone. Folks that have the opportunity to talk about their roles and programs and different initiatives, everyone that's participating in this series, they talk about that work a lot, but there's always people that have been a part of their story that they never have enough opportunities to speak about. All right, so my final question to you, what person in your life do you wish you had the opportunity to talk more about that's been influential in your journey?
So that's a very deep question, Ryan. I mean, I think that probably my faith in God. And I'm nothing without that. And I know that now. And so I realize that this is a business podcast, and so I won't go too deep into my faith walk, but it's something that I know that it's the reason why I am where I am, and I feel that I'm where I'm supposed to be for a reason.
It's super powerful, and I appreciate you sharing. I mean, we all come. We come from somewhere. Things are motivating us every single day. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget those things, and it's certainly even harder to talk about them because it never feels like the right setting, and like we're going to stick to the talking points that we established 5 years ago about what this thing is. But what's exciting about this series to me is that like we should give some space to those other things, right? Because those things are also showing up in the work every single day. So I appreciate you sharing. I appreciate you coming and the opportunity to make all of this happen. I'm learning so much. We're hearing so many interesting things through these discussions, and I'm excited for everyone to be able to go on this journey with us.
Ryan, we appreciate you. I am so glad that we met and that we continue this partnership, and just in awe, and really appreciate you.
Genuinely, it's a pleasure.
Thank
you. Well, thank you to everybody out there.